You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options. Facebook.com/TheOptionsInsider or via questions at TheOptionsInsider.com.
Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
Welcome back to Options Insider Radio, the interview program on the old Options Insider Radio Network, where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of options and derivatives and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of the listeners. If we sound a little bit different, listeners, because we're not in the studio in Chicago, we're in scenic and sunny South Florida here for the Inside ETFs conference. A first-timer for me, first event for me, a very interesting, enormous, over 3,000 attendees covering all aspects of the ETF world. And who should I bump into in the middle of the conference but our old friend, Mr. Eric Cott, the Director of Advisor Education over there at the OIC. Eric, welcome back to the Options Insider Radio program.
Mark, a pleasure to bump into you here. I thought I had to wait until May, Amelia Island, for the Option Industry Conference, but here you are.
It's an early New Year's treat for you.
It is a wonderful treat and a happy 2018 to you, and want to thank you, Mark, again for all the support you provide OIC, especially a note out from the OCC and the OIC for your kind words on the video to help us celebrate our 25th anniversary last year.
Thank you. I was happy to do it. Like I mentioned, it was all heartfelt when in those early primordial ooze days of 2006 when we were just building what will become the Options Insider. We were looking for inspiration in a variety of venues, and let's be charitable, the online options landscape back then was pretty stark. And OIC was one of the few outlets that really seemed to have a grasp of the social media, the online content, podcasting. They were right up there with us in the early days of options podcasting, and so it's been a pleasure to watch you guys grow and evolve as we have grown and evolved. All right, Eric, this is a sprawling and massive conference. Thousands of attendees down here, mostly focusing on the underlying, which is the ETFs, not so much on the options. So what is it that brings you down here?
It's interesting, Mark. So we've been coming for about 7 years, and last year OIC participated not only as an exhibitor, but we also hosted the first women's panel on ETFs and options. And we're seeing, as you know, Mark, a lot more of the sub-advisors in the marketplace, whether it's the Wisdom Trees or the Dorsey Wrights, other asset providers offering overlay strategies. So it's a very big part of what OCC, the Option Clearing Clerk, clears in terms of volume, equity index and ETF volume. But it's important because we have collaborated and know a lot of the asset providers as well as the advisors that do come here, because the content, kudos to Matt Hogan, Dave Nadig from ETF.com that now is now employed by the SIBO.
Yes, he has a vested interest in the options space.
He has a very big vested interest. So all of those things combined make it important for OIC and for me to be down here to continue that mission, as you know, of raising awareness.
Now, speaking of raising awareness, this is my first time down here, so I have no baseline, but you've been coming here for a number of years. How would you gauge the level of options interest? I mean, for example, I don't see an options panel this year amongst dozens, if not hundreds, of different tracks. So are you saying it's growing or increasing, or what are you seeing there?
It definitely is growing. There are 2 panels that will take place over this next few days that will have a option-centric theme to them. So that's encouraging, and we're seeing more of that. But what's occurred in terms of, and I'll have a little selfless commercial here, as you know, last May when you and I were together in Arizona, when we released what was the collaboration that OIC from the FA side, we collaborated with Cerulli, the large sort of platinum research company out of Boston, and we released, and you and I talked about it, which was great, last May, this quantitative study. basically polling over 600 plus advisors from all channels, asking them, are you using options? Those that were non-users, what was preventing them from it? And what was interesting from the study, along with a lot of metrics and data, was that ETFs were a frequent asset class of advisors, and they were using they were using options combined with that strategy. So we did find that in the study, and again, as the ETF marketplace is growing over $3 trillion, there are other asset firms that are looking at different strategies to offer.
Yeah, it is just taking a quick glance at the expo hall floor here. The space is massive. The asset class and the growth of ETFs is just is almost overwhelming. There's so many different flavors. If you want Peruvian ice cream ETF, it exists out there for you. So it really is massive. The corollary then would be that you assume someone along the lines would have some interest in options. Are you seeing that when you go around, when you talk to the exhibitors, when you talk to the vendors, the attendees? Are you starting to see more interest? Hey, you're the OIC guy. I have a question about X or about Y. Are you starting to see that?
We are, and what's encouraging about it too is that you have a big proliferation and concentration of the bigger names. I mean, you and I saw the sign out on the bridge there.
Yes.
SPY celebrating 25 years. I mean, you and I were just in grade school when that happened.
Speak for yourself. I was not even born yet, sir. I was merely a twinkle in the eye 25 years ago.
It's interesting because even if advisors aren't hiring managers that have overlay strategies, they're holding ETFs and realizing that they can write calls against it, or they can buy protected puts, strategies that allow them to be a little bit more tactical. And so that conversation is definitely coming up. As I mentioned before, for total cleared volume, we at the OCC had a slight uptick, as you know, last year.
Surprising. I mean, when I talked to you last, it was in May of last year, that options conference, the outlook for a lot of people was kind of grim. Even halfway through the year, the VIX was anemic, volume already was somewhat plateaued, and I didn't find many people there who seemed like they had a rosy, optimistic outlook for the future. So if you had told them by the end of the year, VIX would continue to erode, and yet options volume would be up somewhere 3 to 4% overall, I think a lot of them would have been surprised.
And you hit the nail on the head. So we did about 4.2 billion contracts, up about 3%. We had a slight downtick in ETF volume. We were over 40% in 2016. We were just at about 38, 39% this past year. With it being, again, a lot of those active names that you and I know, but it is allowing the advisors to look at this and say, hey, wow, I can sort of offer something that is it differentiates me from, the advisor down the street. And so we're encouraged. And again, kudos to the folks that put this conference on for so many years that, look, Quincy Jones is coming out with an ETF. So it's gotta where are we going, Mark?
That could be, depending on your viewpoint, that could be the turning point for the whole thing there. But, you mentioned the passive thing before. That's been obviously a big push in the ETF industry. So many hundreds of billions of dollars just flowing into passive index funds. Has that been a headwind for you guys? You're talking a lot of managers who say, why should I bother being active? Everyone just wants passive. Or are you starting to see maybe the counterpoint to that is that these passive indices are all poised at such astronomical levels that perhaps there is a more groundswell interest in hedging? What are you seeing out there?
Well, we are, and I think it bodes well for some of these portfolio managers who were maybe a little bit earlier to the offering stage of talking about providing a buy right strategy or some sort of protective put hedge, realizing that, as you talked about, low VIX, it's really anemic volatility here, but everybody's prepared. Something's going to happen, and I think there are themes relative to some of the breakout sessions here that I think bring to light that there's a bit of nervousness.
I can't imagine that there wouldn't be. If you're managing any substantial amount of AUM, you have to have your head in the sand to not be somewhat concerned at the somewhat, to put it charitably, frothy levels that we're seeing. Rational or irrational exuberance, depending on your point of view, but there certainly is exuberance in the marketplace, and there has been for some time. So I'm with you. I'd be amazed if you have any AUM at this point, if you're not at least investigating some sort of hedging strategy.
I think they're considering. It most certainly. You ask me when I'm walking through the exhibit hall and in sessions, talking to advisors, they're considering it, as maybe last year they weren't. And the other thing which is exciting for OIC, and they're here today, and you've come across them in the past, is, because our whole mantra is education, we collaborated with the former IMCA, the Investment Management Consulting Analyst Group, that oversees the CPWA and the CIMA, those two accreditations. They actually went through a name change last fall. They are now the IWI, Investment Wealth Institute.
A little easier to remember.
A little easier to remember, and I'm all these acronyms, I can't keep up with them. But what is exciting for OIC is that we are now offering, along with the IWI, a option certificate program online. So that is a 10-hour course that will allow advisors and asset professionals, say who work for a ProShares or something, to educate themselves on their own schedule, and then be able to have a certificate that shows that they have the knowledge of derivatives. That's
something I've been talking about with the OIC
You
since I recorded that video. When I first started back in 2006, it seemed like that was such a clear thing for OIC to be able to do. Of course, there were a lot of headwinds there.
Yes.
Bernie Madoff probably most all of a sudden, go figure. No one wanted to go out and certify a bunch of people in options because they saw only the liability aspect as a result. So I'm glad to see that slowly but surely you're starting to be able to turn that tide, because especially for this audience and for your audience, the advisors, how important is it to them to have that shingle they could hang on their walls? I am certified in X. I mean, any advisor you see, they have a litany of acronyms after their name because that's kind of how they promote and market themselves. If they can come out and also say, and I am also certified in whatever it is, maybe it's income, or is it what is covered in the courses?
We're actually, it's a fundamental, we started off, and I'm glad you raised that, because it did take us a while to get to this point, and I'm really delighted that we're able to do this, because it was one of the missions in my original business plan almost a decade ago when I came to OIC to say, look, this is something the SIBO, the former CBOE, now that we know that they go by SIBO.
Yes, you got to watch yourself.
You got to watch when I pronounce it. I was just with those folks in LA, and maybe we'll get to that in a second, about some of the regional programs we're doing around the country. But the fundamentals of exchange-listed options course, the way that we looked at it with IWI is it's allowing the advisor to add value, differentiate their businesses, and really to help their clients pursue their financial goals with the confidence of understanding options. So it's not a certification, but a certificate. But you hit the nail on the head, Mark, and I'm glad you're reiterating, is they can show now to their clients, look, I've gotten the necessary background, and then I feel comfortable sharing these ideas with you.
Yeah, there's an educational benefit, there's a comfort benefit, and there's a marketing benefit to doing that. You get all three as an advisor. So I'm assuming it's probably basic what's a call, what's a put, and then protective puts, maybe selling some calls, and then maybe if you get super advanced, maybe a collar. That's probably about all you could do in 10 hours. Is that about what the course covers?
It is about, we do get a little bit into the middle lane, as I like to say, a little bit more, because we wanted to make sure we were all things to all people, because a lot of advisors say, look, I understand the basics, but we wanted to encourage the opportunity to expand on it in the future. So I think this is an opportunity to whet the appetite of the advisors, and then build it as an opportunity where we can enhance the education in possibly more advanced strategies, where we're going out to condors and such. But we really wanted to at least baseline provide sort of those tactical basic strategies.
And this is online, so they can access it whenever they want, 24/7, or it's just like a one-time webinar event, they have to be there at a certain time?
It is, it's interesting, it's at their own speed, on their own schedule, which is great. So like most people out there who don't sleep like you or I, you could do this at 3 in the morning if you want. As a matter of fact, I'll be doing a webinar on this Thursday with IWI to talk about listed strategies that advisors are using, along with a portfolio manager and an advisor.
Hopefully not at 3 in the morning.
But not at 3 in the morning.
Your attendance might be a
that
little bit
will be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I'd be there.
On Thursday.
Nobody else would be there.
I know that's true. That's true. But it's exciting to finally see it come to fruition, and you'll most certainly see more about that, and more discussions going on, about the opportunity to take this course online.
That's great, because we see a lot of interest, just from our own educational material we built up over the last decade. People like to be able to access it on their own time, on their own schedule, and they don't like to ask the guy next to them on the desk, hey, what's a covered call again? Or maybe in the case of an advisor, ask a fellow advisor, or God forbid a client, what is this again? So they can come do it at their leisure. It's anonymous, so they don't really, in terms of, they don't have to tell anyone about it. So they can kind of come in, and it's perfect for their schedule, and also they don't have to tell anyone they don't know these things, but once they know them, they can get the little certificate, print it out, hang it on the wall with Eric's picture on it, and then
I don't know if they want that in the
have
office.
that for a great marketing tool. But Eric, one of the reasons I like to talk to you as well, in addition to all the certificates, is that you guys at OIC, you always come armed with some sort of data, some sort of info, some sort of nuggets. What do you have in your back pocket for us these days?
Well, I'd mention, as you and I know last week, what we went through in the market, which we'll probably see more of that.
So you're telling me you have Bitcoin options? Is that what you're telling me? You have those
don't
ready
have
to go?
any of those.
That's the question everyone's asking.
But it seems to be the topic of conversation. You're right here down in Florida. But we had a tremendous volume day, the OCC did last Tuesday, when the market was going through parabolic moves. We cleared over 30 million contracts. And that was probably within the top 10 all-time volume days for OCC. And I believe we'll see more of that, as folks who listen to your show noticed last year when the CME and the CBOE decided to offer futures on Bitcoin, obviously cleared through OCC as well. But, one of the things that we're also, out there talking about is, this will be, I think our 39th, I can't remember the year, but where you and I will be together in Amelia Island in May for the Option Industry Conference.
It'll be our 39th year, but it'll be the conference's 39th
Yes, it'll
year.
be.
As I mentioned before, Eric, I'm barely 25, so I could not possibly have been going for 39 years.
Don't quote me on the years of the conference, but exciting that we'll have, there will be a theme probably with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, because as you know, that seems to be unavoidable.
You can't not talk. I don't care what show we're doing, what topic we're talking. I'm sure if someone listening to this live right now, they would be chiming in with a question about crypto and Bitcoin options. So it is inescapable. Speaking before, it was last time you and I chatted was obviously back last May. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has.
I know.
A lot has happened since then. I know for your audience in particular, the advisors, they're very fixated on tax and everything else like that. Not exactly our big bailiwick on the space, but I know you guys at OCC and OIC do a lot of lobbying to make sure the tax code doesn't onerously punish the options users. I didn't see anything in the new tax bill that really leapt out at me as prohibitive for options users, but is there anything in particular that's resonated for you guys at OCC, or something maybe you guys have been wanting to go back and see changed, or has it been pretty much, the bill been pretty much a non-event for you guys?
Well, I have to say, with Craig Donahue, my chairman, and his leadership has done a tremendous job, along with our lobbying group in Washington, which OCC has. And look, there was a lot of concern last year. And so again, from the standpoint of the advisor, this tax bill got put through so quickly that it required them to kind of, be proactive with their clients. And there was some concern about maybe some of the tax changes, but thankfully we seem to be okay, at least in this current year right now. So
that's good news.
It is good news.
You never know when there's such a sweeping proposal and overhaul that something usually gets swept under the rug, or something usually causes a wrinkle. So look at the old the proposal, the fiduciary proposal before.
Yes.
It essentially almost banned the use of options in IRAs. So
correct.
Seemingly small changes could have enormous impacts down the road. So I'm glad to hear that nothing kept up on the OIC's radar. Well, Eric, we talked to ETFs, we talked your upcoming certificate program, we talked, of course, the conference coming up, as well as all the tax initiatives, as well as all the surprising good year we saw from OCC in 2017. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Any tips of what's coming down the pike from OCC, OIC, or maybe on the advisor space, or maybe a little tease of a study you're working on, or anything along those lines?
I will just give a little tease. There will be a study that will be released from my colleague on the institutional side. Joe Cusick has joined us. My other colleague, Joe Burgoyne, you know very well, is...
Yes, you have a new Phil Gocki, as I like to say. Finally,
we have
that
a new
space
Phil,
has been filled.
And Joe is out there in between the Eagles winning their division. He is out there doing tremendous work, thanks to you and such, with his webcasts, the Wide World of Options, and a lot more programs. And we have more videos that we've put onto our website. And the collaboration, really, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the multiple of exchanges that we represent, and the collaboration that we do with the New York Stock Exchange and the CBOE, NASDAQ, BOX, MIAX, all of them together. And it's one big happy family, and we're fortunate again now going into our 26th year with OIC, to continue to raise the bar, thanks to colleagues like you, of the importance of exchange-listed options and why they really do make sense for not only individual investors, institutions, but my constituency, the advisor.
Well, Eric, I'm glad to finally get you back on. We'll have to do it more often than once every 6 months. We definitely have to stop meeting in such gorgeous locations, Arizona.
Well,
and now for a lot of, we'll have to do it in Nova Scotia in winter or something.
We might have to do it somewhere.
Just to break it up to keep our audience from getting jealous. But I'm looking forward to the certificate program and everything else you guys have coming out. And we'll probably check in again in OIC, which is just 4 months away now, which is crazy.
Mark, a pleasure to always be on the program. Again, thank you for all the kind words that you provide to OIC and to the OCC.
Thank you.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.